¿Qué pasa, my friends? It's me, Nima, and today I want to talk about Trails of Azure. Now, this game's a sequel to one of my favorite releases of 2022 called Trails from Zero. Now, you don't actually have to play the first one to play this game. In fact, they left this very accessible to newcomers. That might actually be a little bit of a problem, as it is one of my major complaints early on in the game. But before we get into that, I do want to remind you guys to please hit that like and subscribe button. We are under 200 subs away from hitting that 1,000 mark, and I know we're going to do it. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. But back to the game. Now, I can't hide my bias on this, as I've said that Trails from Zero might actually be my favorite game of 2022. I put over 100 hours into this game, and I loved every minute of it. Now, there was a slow burn to it, but there's a lot of mechanics to it. There's a lot of services that are available to you, and a lot of different things that you can do in the game that I think really does warrant that extra tutorial time, as well as the storytelling itself. Is it's a grand epic story you really have to know a lot of the backstory to. And with all that in mind, I understood why the first one took so long to really get going. And Trails of Azure follows the exact same characters that we had in the first game, as you're still Lloyd Banning, following the footsteps of his brother, a young detective who was taken before his time. But as Lloyd, you really learned how to navigate more of the seedy underworld, as well as some of the corrupt politicians and businesses, big corporations, while staying true to being a good cop, one that isn't on someone's payroll or taking bribes or anything of that nature, as well as being a team leader. While being pretty young for handling all of these issues, he is also thrust into the life of fatherhood. Well, sort of. I'm not going to get too far into it, but I am going to say that this game really does focus a lot around Lloyd being a team leader and also kind of being a dad and sharing that responsibility with Ellie. Now, most of the story really does build upon these characters and their development and their growth, especially interacting with each other. But the team is not the exact same team. You see, Randy and Tio, who were part of the OG team, so to speak, are both equally doing something else during the beginning of this game, and were given two familiar faces that joined the ranks of the SSS. One that makes a lot of sense and one that makes no sense at all. The first one that makes sense is Major Noel Seeker. We remember her as Fran's sister and also her time at the Guardian Force. The one that makes no sense at all to me is Wazy Hemisphere. Aside from being noted for having a really weird name, he was also an ex-gang leader. In fact, in the first game, there was a pretty big story arc between him and another gang leader as they wanted to find out who was the toughest amongst either one of them. But for some odd reason, he now joins us. Now, they all made friends and he did help as well as the other gang leader, but it almost seemed like he had a better connection with other people, but he actually makes a really great addition to the team, so I'm not complaining. Now, like the first one, this game has pretty much the same graphics, and I'm not gonna complain about that, because these graphics, to me, just look amazing. Now, I know they're not the most realistic, but there is a lot of detail, just in the characters themselves, from everything from the shading to the way that you can pick out just small little details about the character that really expresses who they are. Not to mention the fact that I think this kind of art style is why a lot of RPGs tend to become timeless, because when you go for that realistic art style and everything has to be very modern, well, in a decade or two, it doesn't look so modern. It actually ends up looking kind of bad. So really, this kind of art style really does stand the test of time, and I definitely think it has in this. Now, I understand some people aren't going to be impressed by it, but for me, I find it really charming and just the perfect environment for this story and for these characters. When you can see the characters perfectly detailed out as they're, walking about town, but then you also get a close-up of their face, and it matches so close to what you think they're going to look like just from a distance. I think that, I don't know, they nailed it with this. I've said that with the first one, and I'm going to continue saying that. Also, like the first one, the music does a pretty good job of really creating an environment. As when you're walking around town, it's kind of soft and relaxing, but then when you're in a battle, it gets more intense. I think it does a fairly good job with all of that, but I will say it's probably the weakest part of the game, if you ask me. And honestly, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying, compared to everything else, that's one of those things that could be improved upon. But honestly, throughout this entire game, there was only a couple things that really bothered me. And the first one is a little, just cringy is my problem with it. And that is the treatment of Ellie, as they sexualize her a little bit too much in the game. There's parts where she's being groped by numerous people. There's a few innuendos in there that were kind of cringy, but don't get me wrong, I have no problem with the fact that Lloyd and Ellie are pretty much in a relationship. It's kind of that on and off kind of thing, and they are adults, so any innuendos with those two is fine. It's actually just like other issues in the game, but again, it's just kind of cringy. It's not problematic. Now for me, the other thing that really did kind of bother me was just how long this game took to get going. I actually feel like this game was a slower burn than the first one, and like I said, I understand that it's going to facilitate for new users who maybe didn't know that it was a sequel, or who knows, maybe they couldn't find the first one and just decided this is where they're going to start. But it does in the main menu allow you to actually read the entire backstory of it, and then it goes further on to the tutorials. And I understand as well that when this game came out, it wasn't released within 6 months of the first game, so a lot of people that were playing it hadn't just already learned a bunch of this stuff, so I get that aspect of it, and it's fine, but it's just very, very tiring going through all of these tutorials and learning what each shop does and all that stuff. But I will say, they did add in this like cool little mini game that you can play. It's almost like a Tetris style game, and it's really fun. I kind of like that. But for the most part, this is one of those games that if you liked the first one, you're gonna like this one too. And if you loved the first one like I did, you're really gonna love this one too. And I think one of the things that really impresses me about it is while it does stick to some of the same storylines in a way, just kind of expands on stuff, there is a completely new story going on and a completely new group of characters to interact with and meet, as well as different stuff to uncover, while also still building off some of those main storylines in the first game. And I say storylines, but I really just mean character development. Most of the storylines were set in the first one, but what I'm saying is each character is expanded upon and given even more depth than they had in the first game. And even though this group of characters had really gelled toward the last part of it and really seemed to be comfortable with each other, it's even more interesting how they seem to interact even more complementary with each other and seem to be even closer. And you get to see how they react as a tight-knit team in these different scenarios, but with character development and different issues that happen between the characters that end up expanding upon their own storyline. I hope I'm being vague enough that that doesn't completely make sense, but for those of you who have played it, you do understand what I'm saying. Now, I will say I did put over 100 hours into the first game and absolutely loved every minute of it, to the point where I was incredibly happy to see that these characters that I've gotten so attached to still felt the same. And that sounds weird, but I'm just saying the writing complemented them so much that they felt like the same characters, and obviously they were, but it built upon itself, and I was just incredibly happy with that. Now, I will say, with that 100 hours, I did level up my characters to about level 85, and when I loaded my save from the first one to start this second game, I was pretty shocked when my characters were level 49. Now, I understand that if they allowed that to carry over, that would basically mess up the entire mechanics of the game and make it lopsided, and I understand that, but I do also like the fact that they didn't just reset the characters to 0, which some sequels tend to do, and it feels like you lost a whole lot, but this doesn't, and I think that also adds to the fact that this is a continuation, and it feels like a continuation. Now, just one thing to note, while playing the game, I did notice a few performance hiccups, like a little bit of a lag here or there, but this is before the game even launches, and so I'm pretty confident we're going to get a patch to update that, but even if not, it's so infrequent and just one of those situations that if you blink, you'll miss it. Ultimately, I love this game. I applaud the team for what they've done, and I am so glad that NIS has brought this to America, even if it is, well, quite late, but at least we got it. And, you know, I think this really feeds into the Trails series, makes me incredibly excited for the new Trails game, and wants me to play every single Trails game that I can get my hands on. So ultimately, I have to say, like, I would give this one a 9.5 out of 10. And honestly, that 0.5 deduction is just because it's really slow at the beginning, and there is quite a bit of dialogue to get through, but it's interactive enough and interesting enough to keep you engaged. But I will say, if you didn't like the first game, you don't like RPGs, you don't like the Trail series, you're probably not going to like this game, but if you do, then you're really going to like it. It is everything as advertised, and I really appreciated playing this, having the opportunity to play it, so I really have to thank NIS America for hooking me up with the code. But anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think about this game. Are you interested in checking it out? Are you a big RPG fan? Are you familiar with the Trails series? Let me know anything and everything down in the comment section below. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. You are amazing. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.